Uganda, the country located along the equator with good weather of rains and sunshine throughout the year. Beautiful hills, lakes, waterfalls, and thick forest cover is habited by hospitable, happy people with diverse culture. The central region is inhabited predominantly by the Buganda Kingdom and the Baganda people. At its helm is the Kabaka Ronald Mwenda Mutebi. In western and southwestern Uganda is founded the Toro Kingdom, headed by Omukama Oyonyimba. Another great kingdom in the region is the Bunyoro Kitara Kingdom, headed by Omukama Solomon Gafabusa Iguru. A variety of cultural entities are dotted round the country, most notably in northern Uganda, where the Rot is the head of the Acholi ethnic group. In eastern Uganda, the Bagisu, Japadola, Itesot, and Basoga too have cultural entities, although these are not led by hereditary chiefs. This is the country that is now celebrating the Golden Jubilee of Independence and on the threshold of a bright future. The festivities come after a long and painful birth pang on 9th October 1962, when the British Union Jack was lowered and replaced by the black, gold, and red flag of Uganda.
Uganda is independent.
But as the political leaders basked in the glory of that moment, the tensions amongst themselves and bickering over power remained simmering beneath the surface. Nevertheless, on the night of October 9th, the prospect of independence at last drove the nation to fever pitch and frenzied celebration. Throughout Uganda and Kololo airstrip, where the main event was celebrated, the mood was one of great expectation.
It is now my solemn duty and privilege to hand to you, Mr. Prime Minister, as the representative of the peoples of Uganda, the constitutional instruments embodying the independence of Uganda. May God bless you all.
The Duke hands to the Prime Minister the constitutional instruments.
Today, we are met here not only to celebrate an end, but also to mark a beginning.
Independence was a moment to savor, especially by the indigenous Ugandan population, for whom self-rule meant a lot. But independence came with lingering mutual suspicion, mistrust, and a deeply divided population. Intrigue and dishonesty in the national body politic soon replaced the mood of optimism that independence had ushered in. Open hostility soon became the order of the day among the nation's leading political players. In 1966, the first major clash between the key players in the country took place in what culminated into the first constitutional crisis. Uganda's first constitutional head of state, Sir Edward Mutesa, was overthrown by his Prime Minister, Apollo Milton Obote, as the clash between them came to head. For the first time, the army, which was meant for the defense of the nation's sovereignty, was misused to overthrow the constitutional head of state, and soldiers were to play a major role in the instability of the country for the next 24 years. But Obote's unconstitutional rule and abrogation of the constitution in 1967 did little to stabilize the country as it lurched from one unending crisis to another. In January 1971, the military overthrew Obote, and his army chief, Idi Amin Dada, became the new president. Idi Amin's takeover marked the end of constitutional rule in Uganda and the commencement of rule by decree for the next 8 years. Amin did not brook any dissent, and all those who tried to oppose him were crushed brutally, with thousands perishing in the purges that followed. Soon, Amin earned the reputation as the most ruthless dictator in Africa. Suspension of constitutional rule was soon followed by the expulsion of the Asian community, following a dream he had while in Tororo in 1972.
Asians were brought here by the British because they were forced to come here as laborers to build the railway from Mombasa to Kampala.
Known as the Economic War, it had disastrous consequences for the economy, which began to disintegrate, leading to a decline in exports, manufacturing, goods and services, and raging inflation. Roads, schools, infrastructure, healthcare facilities crumbled for lack of repair and maintenance. The result was simmering discontent and growing internal strife. And as it grew, the regime responded with equally brutal force. In October 1978, Amin ordered an unprovoked attack on the Kagera salient in Tanzania. This uncalled-for war marked the beginning of the end of his brutal rule. The Tanzanian government responded swiftly. Ugandan exiles were quickly mobilized and took part in the war that forced Amin out of power and into exile the following year. But even if Amin was kicked out, the transitional government that was set up was racked with intrigue, fighting, mistrust, and suspicion, which raged in Uganda before the overthrow of Obote in 1971. The successive governments were weak and unstable and were toppled one after the other. Yusuf Lule, the first president under the Uganda National Liberation Front, was ousted after just 69 days in power. His successor, Godfrey Lukongwa Binaisa, did not last long either, as the elite bickered and jostled for influence. Once again, the army took charge and ruled the country under a military commission chaired by pro-Obote Paulo Muanga. In 1980, the army arranged general elections. But while Milton Obote was declared the winner, the polls were marred by rigging and were disputed. Obote was back for the second time as president of Uganda.
The issue of whether Lule wants to be president, Benaisa wants to be president, Museveni wants to be president, who else? Zemogere wants to be president, must rest with the people of Uganda. But if they don't want your vote, if they don't want to approach you, why should you accept them?
His rule ushered in another hegemony, and for the next 5 years, the economy suffered. Civil war ensued in 1981 when 27 young men led by Yoweri Kaguta Museveni undertook a liberation war to restore constitutional and democratic governance in Uganda following the disputed 1980 polls. The start of their liberation war was announced by a daredevil attack on Kabamba military barracks. This war set in motion a movement that fundamentally changed the political, military, and economic landscape in Uganda.
The National Resistance Movement is a nationalist organization. It is a nationalist in the sense that it is fighting for the aims of the whole country and not for aims of a section of the country. Secondly, the National Resistance Movement is a democratic movement. It's a movement which is fighting for democracy. So those two elements are the main elements, I think, in our program.
The NRA was made up of largely humble peasant fighters who took on a better equipped Obote army and humbled it. And while they were unskilled, they were guided by self-belief and determination to restore sanity in the country. In January 1986, and after 5 years of fighting, the NRA captured power and ushered in a new era that Ugandans had been yearning for.
Nobody should think that what is happening today or what has been happening in the last few days is a mere change of guards. This is not a real change of guards. I think this is a fundamental change in the politics of our country.
From the moment Yoweri Museveni was sworn in as new head of state on the steps of parliament, Uganda has never been the same again. The NRM brought with it new reforms. It was a pro-people government with state structures right to the grassroots. A form of grassroots democracy based on the resistance council system was introduced. It was a non-partisan, no-party system of government that embraced people of all religions, tribes, and political affiliations. This system of governance set the foundation for political reforms in the country. A non-partisan National Resistance Council was elected in place of Parliament. But unlike previous August houses, the NRC created special seats in order to bring women directly into managing and taking part in the political affairs of the country. The result of this has been a growing pool of women who have gone on to hold important political positions and offices in the country. In December 1988, a constitutional commission was named to draft a new constitution for the country. After gathering various views from across the country, it submitted its report a year later. In 1994, the Constituent Assembly was elected to debate and pass a new constitution for Uganda. The new constitution that was passed in 1995 ushered in a new form of democracy for Uganda. Months later, Uganda kicked off the campaign to elect the first directly elected president. 3 presidential candidates participated, traversed the country soliciting for votes. But the race was between the incumbent president, Yoweri Museveni, and his former Minister of Public Service and leader of the Democratic Party, Paul Kawanga Ssemogerere. In May 1996, Ugandans took part in the first elections to elect a president through direct presidential polls. Voting was closely watched by independent local and international observers who gave the whole exercise a clean bill of health. 2 days later, the Interim Electoral Commission announced the winner.
The Commission hereby declares the said Kaguta Museveni Yoweri elected President of the Republic of Uganda.
On May 11, 1996, Yoweri Museveni was sworn in as the country's first directly elected president. 5 years later, elections took place again under the 1995 Constitution, returning President Museveni again in a fresh mandate. Certainly, Uganda has come a long way since 1986. The country is enjoying a vibrant democratic rule. Hand in hand with this are fundamental freedoms and a vibrant media landscape. A key component of Uganda's road to recovery was the restoration of peace and security thanks to a now professional and pro-people army, the NRA, later on the UPDF. The UPDF has provided the bedrock for the peace and stability, enabling security of person and property for several years uninterrupted. This has given the populace the confidence and assurance for long-term planning and personal investment, leading to the various developments across the country. Alongside this, the government freed up the private sector, and today it's responsible for 77% of the total investment in the country, a testimony of the confidence in the stewardship by the government. As soon as it came to power, the NRM government undertook macroeconomic reforms, stabilization and liberalization policies which formed the foundation for the current prosperity being enjoyed by Ugandans. When the NRM assumed power in 1986, national revenue collections were only 60 billion shillings annually, not enough to fund the country's needs. But as a result of the stewardship of the NRM government under President Museveni, revenue collection has grown to 11,157 billion shillings per annum. Ugandans have become wealthier, with better and higher incomes, and consumer demand has grown steadily, providing a ready market for goods and services. As Uganda marks the 50th independence anniversary, 23 million people are now safely classified as out of absolute poverty. At the time the NRM came to power, absolute poverty was 57% of the population. Today, as a result of favorable policies and progressive strategic planning, 10 million people in Uganda are now considered middle class, a testimony of the growing prosperity of the population. Now, despite the decline of the contribution of agriculture to total GDP, it nevertheless dominates the Uganda economy. In 2011, the sector contributed approximately 22.9% of the total gross domestic product, with 65.6% of working population engaged in agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry. Coffee continues to be the major cash crop. In 2011, national coffee production increased by 14.6%. Other major cash crops are tea and tobacco, mostly destined for the export markets. In western Uganda, a brand new tea factory at Buhweju attests to the importance of tea as an important foreign exchange earner for the country. Although farming is still subsistence, government has made efforts to modernize it through the National Agricultural Advisory Services (NAADS), and efforts are geared at encouraging commercial farming. This explains the growth of indigenous associations like the Kapchorwa Commercial Farmers Association, KAKOFA. It was formed by 27 small-scale farmers using hoes in 1992. Today, KAKOFA is a major commercial force in Sebe region and has a membership of 2,500 farmers who farm on large scale for both commercial and domestic use. Barley, maize, coffee, and artemisia are the major crops. The modernization of agriculture is a top priority. Bananas are a major food crop in the country, but the crop has been hit by a host of diseases that threaten its production. A presidential initiative on banana industrial development is being implemented in Bushenyi district to improve the techniques of producing it. It also aims to improve the quality and to explore ways of its commercial and industrial production. By the time the NRM ascended to power, manufacturing was at a standstill. Today, there are many manufacturing concerns employing a workforce with the industrial belt of the country. Food processing is a major concern, followed by beverages, tobacco, chemicals, paint, soap, and foam products. A new industrial park was opened at Namamve in order to meet the demand for space by potential manufacturers. In education, over 93% of all school-going children are in school, thanks to universal primary education, which was introduced in 1997. At the time of its introduction, enrollment was just a paltry 3 million pupils in school. While the concerns in the past were access, today the question is one of quality, because most parents now have their children in school.
UP is for what? For all mass education, as opposed to elite education. Because the education we had in the 1960s was elite education. Education for a few. So when you hear them talking, oh, this one is lacking, this one is, yes, it's lacking because we have invited all the people to come in the room here to eat. The room was small, it was only for a few people who are very comfortable. But we have now invited people who are outside in the rain, so you all come, let's squeeze. But access, knowledge.
Whatever the case, by 2010, over 17,000 primary schools had been constructed across the country to provide classrooms for the 8.2 million plus pupils in school. Of these, 12,305 are owned by government, while 2,822 are non-government owned. In tandem with this, thousands of teachers have been trained to reduce the low teacher-pupils ratio. To date, over 168,000 qualified teachers are deployed in classrooms across the country, providing basic education to Uganda's children. The growth in access to education is also reflected in the number of secondary schools that are available. By 2007, the country had 2,664 secondary schools. These have now been expanded to over 3,234, with a total enrollment of more than 1,194,000 students. And because of the peace dividend, there has been an explosion in the number of privately owned secondary schools. By 2009, 2,200 secondary schools were run by non-government entities or individuals. In equal measure, the number of tertiary institutions has also expanded and is still growing. Business, technical, vocational education and training, BITVET, has been emphasized to provide employable skills and competencies that are relevant in the labor market instead of educational certificates. A 10-year strategic plan to ensure this took effect in 2011 and will last till 2020 and is the result of reforms in the BITVET system during the last decade. From just one public university in 1986, Uganda today has 34 licensed public and private universities in operation. Besides private universities, the government has set up public universities of its own. Altogether, these universities have a total student population of more than 140,000 registered students. The leaders in population numbers is Makerere University in Kampala, the first university in the country and the oldest in East Africa. To date, it has 35,000 privately sponsored and government-funded students. Close on its heels is the relatively newer Chambogo University with 26,000 registered students. These universities are playing a huge role in enabling Ugandan and foreign students to attain skills and qualifications for the region's development. Access to health services and health facilities has increased tremendously, with at least 72% of the population within 5 kilometers of a health facility. In the last 2 decades, the number of health centers has grown across the country. For instance, public health centers rose from 1,924 in 2004 to 2,680 by 2011. The health centers are available at various levels of the community, from the Health Center 2s in the parishes, Health Center 3s at sub-county level, and Health Center 4 at the county level. In the same measure, government hospitals increased from 55 in 2004 to 66 by 2011. By 2011, private and not-for-profit health centers were 810 from 554 in 2004. Similarly, private and not-for-profit hospitals increased from 42 in 2004 to 61 by 2011. Private commercial hospitals grew from 4 in 2004 to 16 in 2011, and health centers grew from 854 to 1,414. The health system is complemented by 2 national referral hospitals at Mulago and Butabika, all in Kampala, as well as 11 regional hospitals, all government-owned. In order to ensure availability, medical supplies have been centralized with the national medical stores directly procuring and disseminating drugs up to the lower health centers at the parish. As a result, health indicators have improved tremendously from 1986 when the NRM assumed power. Today, for instance, most children are immunized by the time they're 5 years, and incidents of polio hardly occur compared to the past when the health delivery system was in shambles. Under 5 infant mortality has reduced drastically from 175 in 1990 to 99 by 2010 in every 1,000 infants. Life expectancy, which was less than 40 years, has now grown to over 54 years as health services improve as the population enjoys better welfare and social services. Today, 67% of the population have access to safe, clean drinking water. In urban areas, 91% of the population has access to clean, safe drinking water, most of which is provided by National Water and Sewerage Corporation. Where National Water does not operate, the towns have been provided with privately managed water supply companies, ensuring that the residents get clean piped water in their homes. Since the NRM took charge of the country in '86, the communications infrastructure has improved tremendously. One of the keys to the rapid growth of economy has been the expansion of the road network. Today, Uganda is covered by 68,000 kilometers of roads, a huge leap from the years immediately after independence in 1962. By 1965, the total road network was just 14,598 miles, of which just 738 were tarmac roads. In 1997, the total length of built-up roads was just 25,632 kilometers. Since 2008, the construction and expansion of the country's road network has intensified. For instance, tarmac roads grew from 3,112 kilometers in 2010 to 3,264 the following year. Besides expanding the network of roads, plans are in advanced stages to modernize it further. One of the major projects is the multi-lane Entebbe Expressway, funded by the Chinese and Uganda government. Plans for the construction of this highway project have already commenced. The northern bypass is also due for expansion into a dual carriageway. River Nile at Ginger Owen Fall Dam area will also get a new modern bridge to ease pressure on the existing one. When the telecommunications sector was liberalized, teledensity in the country was so low. By 2007, more than 10 years since the sector was liberalized, teledensity was just 18.9% of the population. And when the NRM came to power, phone lines were just 58,882. Currently, teledensity is over 52% and still growing. The subscriber base for mobile and fixed line users grew from just over 5.3 million in 2007 to 17 million plus by 2011 and still growing. As a result, internet subscriptions have exploded from just above 15,000 fixed line subscriptions to over 88,000 in 2011. The competition in the telecommunications sector has led to the introduction of many innovative services. For instance, by February 2012, registered mobile money users were 2 million. Between January and March 2012, the registered mobile money transfer platforms performed 13.2 million transactions worth 551 billion shillings, an indication of the importance of this service in revolutionizing day-to-day financial transactions across the country. While the telecommunications companies have transformed the way financial transactions are carried out in the country, the banks have not been far behind. The penetration of banks around the country has grown with access to banking services, now virtually assured 24 hours a day, thanks to the network of automated teller machines. Today, Kampala is a bustling modern metropolis. From just a city of 7 hills, the Ugandan capital now sprawls over scores of hills and has spilled over into and absorbed many suburbs in the neighboring districts. As the city expands with modern housing growing each day, this has been accompanied by the development of satellite towns to serve the dispersed population. Tourism is a major sector in Uganda. Under the NRM, the major attractions, the wildlife parks, have been rehabilitated and reconstructed and are managed in a prudent and sustainable manner. Wildlife conservation efforts have helped to preserve the famed mountain gorillas in Bwindi and Gahinga in southwestern Uganda, which were once threatened with extinction. Kampala, the capital city, also continues to be a major conference destination, hosting both regional and international conferences and meetings on a fairly regular basis. It is no wonder, therefore, that Uganda was ranked by Lonely Planet as the world's most preferred tourism destination for the year 2012. Today, Uganda is at peace with itself. The insurgency in northern Uganda that dragged on for decades was finally ended in 2007. The region, particularly Gulu, has now grown into an important economic and financial hub for the region and trade with South Sudan. Regional offices and major financial institutions have set up offices in Gulu town. And for the first time, the potential of the region in terms of productivity and agriculture is now beginning to be exploited. Indeed, as Uganda celebrates its Golden Independence Jubilee, the reputation of the UPDF internationally cannot be disputed. The UPDF has taken part in several international peace missions, helping to stabilize a number of countries. For instance, the UPDF has virtually single-handedly stabilized the once war-torn Somalia before other countries felt confident enough to join in with their troops. From an army that was once the enemy of the people, the UPDF has steadily grown in stature and professionalism. As the country marks its 50th anniversary, it stands on the threshold of a new development trajectory, which is focused on turning Uganda into a middle-income country. And the prospects of delivering on this promise are very bright indeed, following the discovery of large reserves of petroleum. This promises to finance the country's development programs and to finally arm the country with the financial independence it has been lacking for the last 50 years. Besides this, the chronic shortage of power has now been resolved with the commissioning of the Bujagali Power Dam. For the first time in decades, Uganda is supplied with virtually all its electricity needs at 450 megawatts of power. But despite meeting this demand, the plans to increase production have been firmly laid, with prospects for power production in the next decade expected to be in the thousands of megawatts of power. This will not only meet domestic needs, but is expected to supply the excess energy to neighboring countries.
So the target is clear. We need to become a modern country. But of course, Uganda cannot become a modern country only and end there. We must work with East Africa. We must promote the unity of East Africa. We must work for the building of the East African state. So when people ask me about the next 50 years, I hope Uganda would have become part of East Africa. That's the challenge of part, not just by economic community, but to become one country, East Africa, so that we can be able to defend ourselves.
Certainly, NRM government has played a great role in stabilizing the country for more than 2.5 decades, without which the various development strides would not have been achieved. In equal measure, the strides in improving the quality of life and human resource of Uganda have been possible thanks to the long-term peace delivered by the National Resistance Movement government.